Hello, hello, and welcome to Shifting Religious Concepts. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear
All
you.
right, great.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I can.
We are SRC, and we're so pleased to be here with you today for a novel look at the Bible and what it means for all of us. We hope you read the newsletter announcing our new series on the art of creation. That starts right now. My name is Mark Thomas. I'm the SRC moderator. Anala D and Archie Sanders are here with us by the magic of Zoom. Anala and Archie have both been students and then teachers of the Bible for many years. Anala has published 2 books, is also a noted public speaker, and is an ordained minister. And Archie has pastored for over 20 years in Virginia as an ordained minister. So, and they've both actively studied from other spiritual disciplines as well. So they bring lots of experience to our conversation and a unique message of who we are. And they're here today as contributors, but don't forget, they shifted their religious concepts too. All right. Now, today we are honored to welcome our first guest contributor, Dr. Kedar Griffo. Good to see you, Doctor.
Good morning.
Griff has a very extensive resume, has published numerous books on a wide range of topics. In this series, we've asked for him to join us because of his biblical expertise, as demonstrated in his book entitled God, the Bible, the Planets in Your Body. I just happen to have a copy here. I've been reading it, and it's a fascinating read, and I recommend it to anybody. So with the addition of Dr. Griffo, we have a great lineup for this series. Nala will, as always, unpack the philosophical meaning of the scriptures, and Archie will provide facts, research, and history, as well as a deep understanding of the Bible. And Griff will bring his unique perspective as to how the Bible relates to the universe and our bodies, and whatever else you choose, Griff, will be fine too. So now let's talk about our new series, The Art of Creation. Anala, you got some takeaways I think you want to share with the audience.
Absolutely. First, just let me say good morning to each and every one of you. I'm going to share my screen now so that you can see the takeaways along with me. So our takeaway here today is, it starts with when we finish this series, when we complete the entire series, you will have learned, hopefully, information about the female. Does the female hold any significance in the Bible? What does the Bible say about the planets? Does my birth date have any significance as it relates to the Bible? And what does the zodiac signs really mean, and how do they relate to the Bible? So when at the end of this series, you will have walked away with all of this knowledge. So we're excited about that.
All right, thank you for that. Just a small note before we go. When most people think of creation in the Bible, they immediately think of Genesis chapters 1 and 2. And of course, we'll be discussing those, of course. But the audience may remember that SRC in the Imagination series, we discussed creation as still happening today. As SRC talks about different aspects of creation, please keep in mind that we are relating to these things as something that is about all of us now. We do not think of God as separate from ourselves. When we learn from this spiritual perspective, we then are the shepherd of our own thoughts. So now let's get into this creation thing, Anala. You're going to start, I think, with Genesis, but I have a question for you from Genesis verse 26, where it says, "Let us make man in our image, about our likeness." It doesn't say, "Let me make man in my image or after my likeness." It says, let us make man in our image. That's an important distinction, correct?
Absolutely, it is. Number one, it shows us that when everything was created, when the universal creator created us, it wasn't alone at all. And so, but to better understand who the us is in that scripture, we first need to go to the book of John. first chapter, and we're going to read verses 1 through 4. So you can open your Bibles and turn to that if you have them. If not, I'm just going to read it to you. And that's the book of John, first chapter, verse 1 through 4. It indicates that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And the final verse says, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. First, let me say that a lot of us were taught that, the he in the Bible was Jesus. But we learned in some other episodes, and we defined the word he, and he is also defined as anyone without reference to sex. So he is also defined as anyone without reference to sex. But before we talk about who the us is, let's also look at a few other definitions that I know will become very important as we begin to understand who the us is in that passage. So I'm going to share my screen with you again so that you can also look at the definitions. So we're going to look at the definition for word, because we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at the definition for life, and we're going to look at the definition for reproduction. So word, and we talked about this definition in another episode, it is a unit of language consisting of one or more spoken sounds or vibrations or their written representation that functions as a principal carrier of meaning. And then life is the sum of the distinguishing phenomenon of organisms, especially metabolism, growth, reproduction, and adaptation to environment. And then we also want to look at reproduction, as reproduction is a part of the definition for life. Reproduction is defined as the act or process of reproducing or something made by reproducing, an original, copy, or duplicate. So we wanted to break those or define those words so that it will be easier for us to talk about who the us is in this particular scripture. So now, when the universal creator, who we consider as the divine masculine consciousness part of creation, part of us, spoke of let us, the divine masculine was speaking directly to the divine feminine subconsciousness part of creation. So think about this. Remember, we talked about our conscious mind is the mind that thinks and accepts or rejects any information is presented. It's aware of the world around it, and although it can imagine all kinds of things, it does not reproduce anything. So you think about a male who has an imagination to have all kinds of children. Say this man says, I want to have 15 children. And in fact, carries the sperm to be able to have those 15 children. But guess what? He can carry that all day long, but he cannot reproduce those children because it takes another part of the creation, another part of the mind to be able to do this. And this part of the mind is a giver. It's a giver of the semen. It's a giver of the thoughts and all of those things. And it's aware of what's already created. It's aware of what's already prepared for manifestation, but it cannot deliver it into this world. Now, let's take a look at the divine feminine consciousness or subconsciousness. Now, this part of the creation, this part of the mind is always willing and ready to receive the thoughts or the semen from the male masculine, from the divine masculine. This mind's sole responsibility, or this part of creation's sole responsibility, is to reproduce. Now, remember I said reproduce because everything has already been created. Everything has already been produced. So this part of the mind, part of the creation's job is to reproduce. So I'm convinced that the us in the story of Genesis was the divine feminine aspect of our universal creator who is called God. God is not only, we were led to believe that God was a he. God is both masculine and feminine. That's what God is. And it's the divine feminine part of God that produces life in this world. And what is reproduced in the world is the word. What's reproduced in the world is the word. And the word is in each and every one of us. We carry, as humans, we carry the principal meaning. And if you take a look at the word meaning, it also means intention. We carry that within our bodies, within our souls, within our spirit. And that, what I'm talking about, is the DNA with God.
Okay, thank you. Griff, I wonder if you have any input on this, on the divine masculine and the divine feminine.
Yes, you guys can hear me okay, correct?
Sure.
Okay. Yes, if you look at the Bible, starting with the book of Genesis, it in my research, it deals with the initial creation being from the feminine perspective, and then they created a man. So in the science of what they call parthenogenesis, where you have organisms that can reproduce asexually without the aid of a male sperm. So that science exists and has existed since the beginning of time and will always exist, in the fact that women had the ability, or females had the ability, to create without a man. And it was the woman whose womb was the portal that merged the spiritual world with the physical world, because it's through her that we emerged onto this particular planet, onto this particular planet. So when you go to the Bible and you read where God said that he hadn't created a man yet, and he needed a man to fertilize the earth. Well, if you're going back through the Hebrew text or the Hebrew words, you get the word for ground as Adamah, A-D-A-M-A-H. And then you get the word for man, which was Adam. So then when you're looking at it from the Hebrew text, it says that the earth or the ground or the Adamah was already here, and they needed to create an Adam. Well, Adamah is a feminine word because of the ending A-H in Hebrew, which makes all words, or the majority of words that end in A-H, as feminine. So if we reimagine that, we see it that there was women already here, and they had to create a man to fertilize them to begin the so-called reproductive process. So that's how I interpret that, from that perspective of being that the womb was first, and then the man had to be created to a man had to be created in their image and after their likeness to work the earth, or to fertilize the earth, if y'all understand that allegory right there.
Sure, I do. So Archie, on that same subject, on the masculine and the feminine, can you I was doing some research, and I saw that the book of Genesis itself was written in the 5th or 6th century. Is this right? Are we talking about, we're talking about a story in the book of Genesis, that the book of Genesis is a story?
Well, yes. First of all, good morning, everybody. As I always say, there is a lot of symbolism in this book we call the Bible, and I tell you, there are stories, and as Dr. Griffo was saying, you got to understand that what he said, it make a lot of sense to the esoteric. I would say, the exoteric, it's two different things. So the symbolism, as Anala was saying about the word in the beginning, was the word. One of the things that the church fathers did, they didn't understand a lot of the symbolism when they wrote the Bible. The secret societies understood what was being written, but the church fathers didn't. So they thought they were they were giving you something, but they gave you some words. So you got to be very, very careful with words. Words can always be debated. And it said in the beginning, and first of all, if you say something begins, it must end. So they can't possibly be talking about the ultimate God, the eternal Father, the one that created everything, because there's no beginning to him, there's no end to him, because if he begins, he has to end. You understand what I'm saying? So we're looking at some symbolism here, and it's just like the letters that was used to I guess describe God, Jod He Vahi. We look at the he's and we begin to see that, as Anal was saying, we always think that, it means a man. Now that letter, when that symbolism for that letter was, he was a window to see. So to make it real simple, our imagination. See, if we don't come to understand that let us in that scripture was just not talking about someone that you could put your hand on, that was tangible. It was saying, let us, our imagination, our conscience is what I have come to find out is the God that they were talking about, that created everything, the creation up there. It starts up there, let us. And again, the he is the imagination, that is the wonder that looks out, and as we said before, we don't like to think that we're the ones that had caused us to be in the situation that we're in, but we thought ourselves in this situation.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So there is a lot of symbolism, and there are a lot of stories, allegories. Paul even told us that, that this was, I'm being allegorical,
Right.
so you know what I'm saying. So, but it's about the mind, the imagination. It's a drama. It's a psychological story that helps us, the ones that digs deep. You got to dig deep and not just look at the covering, and go down deep and try to find out what it is that the Bible is really saying to you.
All right. Thank you for that. Anala, you got anything? You want to add anything?
No, I think that was really good. I'm listening in. I'm
I do
excited.
have one more question for Griff, just on this same subject. Now, you're talking about that the feminine was actually the origin. Is that not correct? And
That
that
is what
later on males were introduced, or can we say created?
yes. If you look at anthropology, the oldest being that they found on the planet was a female. And women pass along what they call mitochondrial DNA in larger numbers to other women. So if that's passed from woman to woman, then where did it come from if men were here first? It's called Genesis, genealogy of Isis. So it's breaking down the genealogy of the woman first, who then created a man and then made the man her subject and eventually put him on the throne. But initially it was the woman that was here who in time created a man. Through the female anatomy, they have something that they call the Bartholin gland, which is located inside the vagina of women. And through that Bartholin gland, it lubricates the sexual organ of women, but from that came sperm. So it was the Bartholin gland that eventually gave birth to the sperm, where the women had the testes or the ovaries dropped, became testes. Men have breasts that don't work. And so when you look at the anatomy of the male and the female, you know, all of the women's parts work, but all of the men's parts don't necessarily work. So then you have to look at it from embryology, and you'll see that as a embryo is developing, it first has a vagina, and then at a certain point, the switch hits and it turns into a phallus. So biologically, we see that women were here first. And like I said, even based off of the interpretation of the scriptures, we can get the interpretation that women were here first. So
Okay.
that's where I base my information from.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Archie, anybody else? Archie, got anything else on that?
Oh, that's good information. Yeah,
Oh, I
that's
agree.
right. That's right down my line. That makes a lot of sense, because we always, people become awed when they said Jesus was born of a virgin, born without a man. But see, there's a lot of symbolism to that, because you got to understand, as Doc said, Professor Griff, he said, you know, you got to understand that in the beginning, that there was woman. You didn't need the male to produce at first, you know. So it was one package.
Right.
But you gotta dig to find
Okay.
it out.
All right. I think Kashina's got her hand up. You got a question, Kashina?
So I had to figure out how to do the hand thing. So with all this, this is blowing my mind. But so if women were first, and this is going back to Griff and not all of you guys. If women were first, then why do we use the word he? Why wouldn't we just say she? I don't understand that.
Let's start with Griff.
Where it was not saying she instead of he, if that's the case.
As Brother Archie mentioned earlier, the Bible was written by patriarchal men who didn't want to give women their acknowledgement. So they use certain code words to acknowledge women, but not outright acknowledge women. But when you look at, again, words like Shekinah, which is, you know, kind of similar to your name, but that's a feminine word, and it means the spiritual essence of God. When you look at other things found in the Bible where, let's say, the words, like I said, AH at the end of a Hebrew word designates it as feminine. And El at the most Indian of Hebrew words defines it as masculine. So then you have this duality. Every time you have the male, you have the female being right there in concert with that male, but they didn't want to say them by name. So then they would use these hidden words like Shekinah to define women, or the word Jehovah has a feminine ending, even though it has the duality of the masculine and the feminine, with the fire being the masculine and the water being the feminine, because the man as the fire rises up like fire does, and then the water receives like a woman's reproductive organ does. So then they would say it in those types of terms and not directly giving reverence to the woman. But it was all about the woman, because she was the one that brought forth the anointed Messiah that allegedly saved the world from sin. So I don't want to ramble, but it's all in the words that they use to describe women. If you notice, a lot of the women, their names end in AH.
Wow.
Delilah,
Wow.
Hawa, Rebecca, Leah, and so forth and so on. And then you had the man, who was her counterpart. So it was always that duality, but it was the woman is here first, but they couldn't acknowledge that because they wanted to have a position of authority over the women. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll shut down.
Oh,
That.
no
Oh, that's
problem.
good.
Just opened up a door for me.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here like, well, let me go back and look at this again. But this, wow, okay.
And even as Griff was mentioning, even the name Sarah, all
Mhm.
the AH's on the end.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
All
Makes
right.
sense.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Christine.
Thank you.
All right. I think in a related way, Archie, staying with John chapter 1. Now, we got some context from Anala on that, and where it said, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God."
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand on that a little bit? And what about the Word is also, and that what is the Word that is also God? What about that?
Well, as I was saying, Thomas, that was good. I was getting that y'all just taking me on back. Because see, in the beginning was where, as I was saying, if something begins, it must end. So the Word was God. The Word was with God. Okay, as we look at the minds of the church fathers, and again, as Professor Griff was saying, Doc was saying there, at a time, women were ahead of a lot of things, but that was during the matriarchal time where that nobody wants you to know of. But in order for us to see that in the beginning was the Word and the Word was God, we have to look back and see that now, wait a minute, what are we talking about here? Because see, the God that they describe in the Bible, he can't have a beginning. He have to have always been, or he would end at some time. So the Word, what are we talking about? The Word was God. That Word that has been described to us, and I think all the esoteric type uh, people or those who understand the secrets, like the EXO, the EX, the EXO, they are given certain things. You know what I'm saying? That's why I always say, yeah, we were given the Bible. It was a given. They gave it to us because there are secrets in there. So the Word, we have to see the Word which God have to come. Eventually, we have to come to understand that it is our imagination, our thought, our conscience, our conscience. I don't care when this flesh rots away, the conscience, the soul is not going to die. I mean, that's a little deeper. It gets a little deeper, but you got to understand that we bring about with our imagination. That's why he represents a window, a window. And see, when we look at it, oh, you're talking about a male. Well, that's how it was written. But if you find out what the symbols meant, how Jod He Vahi ties together those letters that they couldn't pronounce them, but those were the letters that supposed to describe who God was. Then you break it down and you come to find out what those letters meant. You'll see that there's a Jod He and there's a Va between the two He's. The two He's are windows. The he is, and what else can the windows be except for your imagination? How you look out and see what it is that you want it to be, not what it is. So the Word, yes, in the beginning was the Word. The Word will never die. The Word 2 plus 2 will equal the reality, no matter what happens. If you understand what I'm saying, and y'all, I'm sure y'all said, well, 2 plus 2 is 4. Of course it is. If they blew up the whole world right now, 2 plus 2 will still be 4. You can't change that. That's the
Okay.
Word.
Anala, you got anything on that?
No, not at all. I think that I think
I
Archie
just
and
thought
Griff.
I'd check in with you. You
No,
you got,
I'm
you
really,
got more going on
I
here.
am enjoying this. This is great. I'm enjoying the dialogue and the knowledge that's coming forth.
Well, that all sprung from one question, just on this idea
Yes,
Yeah.
of the scripture in Genesis of us, right?
yes,
Griff, you got anything
absolutely.
else before we move on?
No,
Okay.
I don't know. I'll hold
Well,
on.
No,
for
we
now.
no,
we're
we
gonna
want you
find,
to
because I got
share it.
another
Yeah.
question for
Yeah,
you right now.
Griff.
Oh, go ahead. We go with the next question.
Okay. Now in John chapter 1, verse 4 this time, moving down 3 verses, down to verse 4, this speaks of the light as the life of men. Is this John's way of being philosophical, or is there more to this?
In my understanding, it is. If you go back to Genesis, where it speaks of in the beginning was the light, and that word in Hebrew is the word or, and that means not only the sun, but it also means intellect. So in the beginning was the intellect first, and then later it created the sun, the moon, the stars, where they could be able to tell the time and to tell, create a calendar. But initially it was the intellect. So again, in embryology, when a fetus is conceived, the first thing created is the brain, then the heart. So the brain then starts to animate the rest of the body, where the intellect first started though here at the top. So when it says, again, was the light was intellect, or, intelligence. So that's my understanding of where it says, there was the light. The light was the intellect.
Hmm. The thing that we've never talked much before, but listening to you, I mean, I wonder about what the actual people who wrote these verses was thinking. Were they actually thinking the same thing that you're telling me right now?
They were thinking what's called in the esoteric world the great works, or alchemy, the process of transference of base elements to more precious elements, or said another way, to take your lower self and convert it to your higher self. So then the way that they wrote these things was to speak to those who were initiated into those mysteries, but to the profane, or those who were not initiated into those mysteries, they would read something totally different. That's and right. Get their understanding. But the initial and the original overstanding of it was for the select initiates who were working to transform the lead, as they say, into gold. So, or to take your lower self, that beast man, and convert it into become a son of God.
Fascinating. Does this relate to parables too? Why, for instance, Jesus used so many parables?
Absolutely. He said, and I think in Matthew or Mark 13:13, that every time he spoke using parables. So once we look up the definition of parables, or what another word that they use in the Bible is dark sayings, then we find out that it was a coded way that he spoke to the disciples, where he would say, to those who have ears, they can't hear, to those who have eyes, they can't see, but to you guys, I'm going to give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. So then to the masses of people, he spoke one way, and then to his select initiated few 12, he spoke a different language according to that particular interpretation of that scripture. So yes, he always spoke. He said he never spoke unless he spoke in parables. And that's the problem that a lot of people that take the Bible as literal, they miss, because they don't understand parables and dark sayings.
Archie, you got anything on that? You want to chime in on that?
Well, I want the audience to understand. You got the here at SRC, we're trying to get people to think outside of that religious box, that box that have gotten you stuck in there, and you're not understanding what has happened to us. It's not such a bad thing But to me, it was it's personal because I believe that we were given something, and but when we take it literally, it does us no good. You got to know what it's saying to us. You got to come to understand what all this symbolism is. But so that means that you might have to skip some movies, and you know, I ain't gonna say turn Netflix off completely because there's stuff I watch on, but you're gonna have to give some time to studying, because first of all, it's a slap in the face for you to find out that there was never a person that ever walked the earth named Jesus Christ. You know, it's not going to be fun when you find out when we done jumped around and rolled on the benches and knocked pews over and
Well,
you know,
that's what
because
you got to do, right?
yeah, they got to us psychologically, and and most of us, we don't look at the psyche of things. We feel it. Oh, good Lord Almighty, here we go. I mean, I've been there. I done preached to people, hair stand up on their head, and they dance around, and then the next day they fall right back into the same trench that they were in.
Oh,
They
yeah.
didn't really get anything except for a good feeling at that time. We got to come to understand what all this stuff means, the earth, and what, as Professor Doc was saying, the earth, what it means, how they use that symbolism to only educate a certain few. It's just like I said, I think before, you can't walk up in the White House and just live in the White House. You can't even become, once you become elected, there's still policies that are pushed by politicians that keep you out of certain areas. But they know about it. You know, they understand the meanings of a lot of things. And that's the way it is, y'all. We got to get to where we'll move out of that box. And I know people looking at us saying, you know, our own family say, oh, we're a cult. Well, you know, you don't know what a cult really is. You're probably a part of a cult yourself when you
Right.
really look deep into it. But we're trying to get people to think, man, think. I'm a preacher. I did my work. I got my degrees. I did my study. And I put my time in according to what man said I should do on earth. But I had to come to think a little deeper, y'all. I get tired of seeing folks, you know, just thinking they have something and they don't have anything.
All right. Well, wow, we got a good conversation here. I can't believe how fast the time is going by. We're gonna try to fit in just a little bit more, but we've only got about 5 minutes. I can't believe it. You know, Griff, I don't know if you saw our last program on Jesus Christ or not, and Archie just mentioned that. I was just wondering, you know, in a nutshell, what's your conception, or what are your studies found on who he was, or how he was personified, or what's your ideas on that?
My understanding or overstanding is that Jesus Christ is a gland inside of our heads called the thalamus. Right around the center mass of our forehead, we have what most people point to as the pineal gland, and that controls the spiritual essence of man. And then you have the pituitary gland, which controls the physical essence of man. And then you have the thalamus, which controls the spiritual essence of man. So that's the trinity that's found within our brains. So now let's say every month, around, well, let's not even use that analogy. Inside of your brain, you have what they call cerebral spinal fluid. And it circulates here, travels down your spinal column, goes down into your sacrum. Your sacrum is the area of your body where your reproductive organs are located. And then that oil circulates back up. So it's a pump that happens that takes that oil from your head and it goes down and it comes back up. In Hebrew, they call that oil shemen, S-H-E-M-E-N, and it's the so-called anointing oil. So when they your head with oil, it was this particular fluid that bathes your brain and travels down your spinal column, your 33 spinal vertebrae, and then it goes down and then it brings itself back up and then it crosses over what they call the cross. Because if you put your hands out, they're equal length, and then you got the top half of the cross, which is short, like the Christian cross, and then the lower half is the lower half cross. So when you cross this, you are then crucified in Golgotha. Golgotha is a Hebrew word which means skull. Or you're crucified in Mount Calvary. Calvary from the Greek word Calvinus, which also means skull. So then Jesus is crucified once that oil rises back up, which is called chrism in Greek, from where they get the word Christ or Krishna. And so it crosses over, and then it goes to the right hand of the Father, because in the right hand of the brain, or the right side of the brain, is called the third ventricle. This ventricle, there's 4 ventricles in all that are found inside of your brain. And those 4 ventricles are where the Bible talks about those 4 rivers, that when, you had the one thing in the Garden of Eden, and then they split into 4 rivers. Where those 4 rivers were those 4 ventricles that are in your body that then differentiate into 4 different liquids: phlegm, blood, spit, and urine. And those are made up of 4 different colors, or some people call it black bile and yellow bile. But those 4 different colors deal with alchemy. If you could again look up citrinus, albedo, negredo, and rubedo, those are red, white, black. See these colors?
Yeah.
It deals with alchemy. If you go back to any of the ancient societies, they also deal with alchemy. If you read the book of Solomon, you will find these same colors. You find in the Bible where they coded these people's names, like Laban. Laban means milky white. Or Adam. Adam means red. Or Kedar. Kedar means black.
Mm-hmm.
So they're teaching you about this process of alchemy, and they coded it as the name Jesus Christ, as that chrism descends down your spinal column, and then it must come back up.
Okay.
So then you have, last thing, you have the Old Testament for the word testes, testes, where the sacrum is. And then you have the word testes also means skull in Greek, from the Greek word. So then that all descends down to the testes and then rises back up via the revelations. So that's what it is. It's spiritual. It's physiological in nature.
That is a mindful right there. Archie, you got anything? We've only got a few minutes left, but you good? You muted yourself, Archie, so
I guess if I unmute myself, you can hear me. Because I didn't want anything to interfere with what Doc was saying. That is awesome. Because right quick, I know we don't have much time, because
no, we don't. Go ahead.
You got to understand what he's saying is most of us never get to know that. We don't get to understand. We don't understand. And the church fathers took a lot of this stuff and put it together so that those that was esoterically learned, they knew and understood. But we that was exoteric, they gave us what they thought we should have, because Genesis, what I found out was Genesis mean origination, and Exodus was the way out. And they took all that, and once we got to get to that one day, the Genesis, the original, it was that's supposed to have been original, where everything originated from, and Exodus supposed to have been a way out. But then it began to describe a whole lot of other things that we need to know, which I sure can't tell you now. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I'm enjoying.
But we got some more episodes.
We got.
Yeah.
Not today, but yeah, next week we'll be hitting this again. We'll start off running next week. Get a little, cover a little more ground. Maybe I'll talk less. But
you do it all right.
Nala, you got anything else? Why don't you give us what you're expecting next week, and all? Maybe it's kind of hard to tell from this vantage, but
Well, yeah, but that's okay. Well, we're going to continue to talk about what we were talking about today, because I think there's so much more knowledge. Although we write these scripts and things like that, when we get into knowledge that we believe people need to understand, we don't want to stop that. So next week we're going to continue talking about this. And I also want to mention too that Dr. Griffo has a book that can break all this stuff down. So Thomas, if you will hold that book up, please. So the
Sure.
audience can see it. I know you've done it already, but I wanted them to know that this is a book that you can get, and his information is in the newsletter. You can definitely go to that newsletter and order that book and some of the other 23 books that he has written, that then you would have this information right at your fingertips. So if I had to say anything about next week, it is simply that stay tuned for much more of this, and tell your family and your friends to join us next week so they can get into this knowledge as well.
Okay, well, while you're going, why don't you talk about the SRC challenge too?
Oh, yeah, well, let's do that. Well, I was surprised to find that no one, not anyone, zip, submitted a summary for the SRC challenge. So therefore, the money is still on the table. So when this series is over, you again have an opportunity to submit your summary for this series here on what you've learned in this series, how you have attributed it to your life, and the changes that that you've seen in your world as a result of using the information that you learned. Because SRC, we're not just here to show our pictures, to be on on YouTube or any of that. This is about you learning. This is about you understanding who you are.
Okay.
So that's the challenge. So again, we're starting again. So at the end of this series, we will be announcing the winner. And again, you send it, look on the newsletter, and it will tell you how to enter and what the criteria is.
All right. Thank you for that. And all of us here with SRC want to thank the audience for attending today's presentation. We at SRC want to thank Dr. Griffo for being here. Excellent
Wonderful.
presentation today. I really appreciate it. Anyway, you can email, if you have any further questions or comments, you can always email us at shiftingreligiousconcepts@gmail.com. Also, don't forget that this presentation will be available on YouTube soon. And even if you attended today, we really would appreciate it if you go to YouTube and give us a thumbs up on that website, because that helps us get exposure. Excuse me. If you're not subscribed to our newsletter, go to shiftingreligiousconcepts.com/registration and join us. So that's it for today's broadcast. We wish you all peace, health, wisdom, and love, of course.